Hello everyone, welcome back to another Strategoi video. Ryan here for what will almost definitely be my last Scourge of Ghyran update, at least for the daily updates, because I'll be out of town for the next 2 days. Speaking of which, the next one looks like, because it says, for tomorrow's Scourge of Ghyran, we focus on one of the few factions who really aren't attempting to make it actively worse to live here, considering we only have Soulblight and Sylvaneth left, and considering the season is set in Ghyran, which is kind of the home of the Sylvaneth, it seems like tomorrow is Sylvaneth, and then the last day, Thursday, will be Soulblight, both of which will be covered by the lovely Jonas from the channel, obviously. He might have his own way of doing things, but I appreciate him jumping in to take care of the duties. Like I've said a few times before, I'd like to do a tier list of these updates, or maybe even some output differences for specific units, if you guys would like that. That said, in general, most of the changes we've seen to War Scrolls aren't output. Though they might have output improvements, that's not really the main reason they changed. It's usually because some tech is being added to the army or making the unit interesting to take, especially for heroes. So, anyway, but I'm open to doing that too. Of course, we got the new GHB coming out. I've seen confirmed somewhere that it's a 1-week pre-order, so when it goes up this Saturday, it should be in people's hands if they have good delivery mechanisms for the following Saturday, so that's nice. Yeah, looking forward to how everything's going to go. But today we'll be talking about Nurgle. Before I forget, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and let us know what you think about this update down in the comments below, or join us in the Discord. We do have one little General's Handbook factoid, but it's basically just confirmation of what we've already seen. It says, manifestations have been updated and now come with their own bespoke War Scroll cards. For most manifestation lores, so I'm assuming for everything but that of the Kronspine Incarnate, these are presented as 2 double-sided War Scrolls with a spell on each side and the 4th side comprising the summoning rules for each spell. That's a little confusingly worded, because like, what's the 4th side of 2 double-sided War Scrolls? I don't know. Anyway, whatever way you want to read that, it sounds like they're at least printing the summoning rules, which is nice, because one of the things we've complained about the app is that if you look up, say, Suffocating Gravetide, you'll get 2 hits at least, 1 each for the War Scroll itself, and then the summoning rules. So it's nice to have them at least in one place. Of course, as these War Scrolls get updated, like their points change, that won't change anything. But if there's any FAQ, just like with any other War Scroll cards, those won't be up to date. But hopefully they won't change too much in the season. And if they're going to keep printing them this way for future General's Handbooks, then yeah, they'll update themselves essentially. Okay, so let's talk about Rotigus. That's our only battle profile that's changing here. Rotigus has been 430 points and seems to be staying that way. Of course, it could change with the new points changes. Can still take 0 to 1 Plague Scion, that's their Italics hero, and any MAGGOTKIN of Nurgle, still, of course, on a 130 millimeter base round. So let's take a look at the War Scroll. I actually like this War Scroll a lot. I took a look at it in the Metro on the way back from work. So he's got a 6-inch move, 22 health, control 10 now. So he just got double the control score. We don't see this on too many models outside of Kragnos and the Gargants, but Be'lakor famously has a control score of 10. I believe Nagash as well, and a few other notable exceptions. But yeah, nice. So he's basically double control score. That's cool. 4-up save, probably still a 5-up ward. I'm going to scroll down here and double check that. So, as in, it's always been a 5-up, yep. And then War Master, unique, Hero, Monster, Wizard 2, that stays the same, Ward stays the same, Chaos, MAGGOTKIN, Nurgle, and Demon. So basically the only news here is that the control score got doubled. Okay, so as I am wont to do with these War Scrolls, I'm going to cover look at the melee profiles, compare and contrast those, then look at the abilities that exist on the index version of the War Scroll, and then compare them with what we now have on this temporary War Scroll. So melee weapons, let's start with the Gnarl Rod. That's been 5 attacks, 3s, 2s, -1, 3, and it brackets down to 3 attacks after 10 or more damage. Nothing has changed on that. That stays the same. Then the Fanged Maw. that lost an S. It has been Fanged Maws, but let's see if that means anything. 2 attacks, 3s, 2s, -2, 2. Nope, no changes. Just lost an S there. And then Host of Nurglings, which has been crit auto wound and companion still. 10 attacks, 5s, 5s, no Ren 1. So it doesn't appear that anything changed about the melee profiles. So let's talk about the original warscroll abilities. Besides the battle damage bracketing ability, there was Bringer of Plenty, add 1 to casting rolls for this unit. That stayed on the warscroll, so sometimes we don't see anything stay from before as far as abilities are concerned, but that one did, so he still has +1 to cast for his 2 spells. We had a Rampage that was a once per turn army any charge phase Rampage. As you can see on the new warscroll, the Rampage is now any combat phase. So let's see what the charge one was on the old warscroll. Mountain of Loathsome Flesh. If this unit charges this phase, roll a dice. On a 3+, pick an enemy unit within 1 inch of it to be the target. Roll a number of dice equal to the number of models in the target unit. For each 5+, inflict 1 mortal damage. Okay. Yeah, sure. So basically, anti-horde Rampage that first needs to go off on a 3-up. Yeah, was on a 5/5s for the mortal damage. So, decent. And then his last ability that was on the existing War Scroll was just his spell. It went off on an 8. It was called Deluge of Nurgle. Pick each diseased enemy unit on the battlefield and each friendly Maggotkin and Nurgle unit in combat with any diseased enemy units to be the targets. So let's talk about what that means. Nurgle's got a battle trait that basically spreads disease. There are a number of ways to cause this. I'm probably going to forget a few of them, but basically standing in combat is one of them. They've updated the rules so that since the original release of the index, so that when a diseased unit dies, it has a chance of spreading the disease. And there's other ways to generate disease points. But anyway, so this old spell was picking each disease unit on the battlefield and then any friendly Maggotkin and Nurgle unit standing in combat with any disease as targets. Roll a d3 for each target on a d3 2+. If the target is an enemy unit, inflict amount of mortal damage equivalent to that. If the target is a friendly unit, heal that much. So, I mean, that certainly is not a bad spell by any stretch of the imagination. So, and remember, the points didn't change on this guy. So right now, we're seeing, until we actually look at the new abilities, we're only seeing +5 or double control score, and then these things are going to fall off, except for Bringer of Plenty, which is the +1 to cast. So let's take a look at what we did get. So we've got Befouled Rainfall. That's subtract 1 from save rolls for enemy units while they're within 6. Now this is going to get better by the next rule, but let's just analyze it for what it is. So within 6 of this unit, he's on a decent sized base. And within 6, obviously Nurgle's slow, but they want to get into combat as soon as they can and start spreading disease and doing all that. So he doesn't even have to be in combat with a unit. It's a pretty big bubble already, a 6. And he's tanky as hell. I mean, he's 22 health on a 4-up, 5-up, so he's not dying anytime soon. But subtracting 1 from save rolls is functionally giving him, unless someone has, a save that is particularly bad, it's functionally bumping his main attack, the one that can bracket, to Ren 2, and his Fanged Maw to Ren 3, and even his Nurglings up to Ren 1, functionally, unless their save was already really bad. But going into elite stuff, like with a 3-up save, all of that's making a difference. Then we've got this spell that replaces the one I was just talking about, which is the one that would help hit all of the disease units on the table. It goes off on a 7. It's called Virulent Downpour. Add 3 inches to the range of this unit's Befouled Rainfall ability, the one that I just mentioned with the 6-inch -1 save, for the rest of the battle. This unit can be affected by this ability multiple times, and the effects are cumulative. Then inflict 1 mortal damage on each enemy unit within range of that ability. Now, so he's a 2-caster, so you could be doing this 10 times per game if you want. Not that the 2-caster has anything to do with it, but that would allow you to still cast another spell if you want on your turn. So that would be once per each of your turns, and then once as a magical intervention. And with the +1 to cast, it's not unreasonable to think he's getting some of those 7-ups off. And so you could be continuously adding range to this. It only takes 2 times of this going off to double the range of his -1 save. I mean, to get up to 18, you have to get it off 4 times. But that 18-inch holy, or not holier than inch bubble, just within bubble, is huge. I mean, think about playing against Catacross, who's working with mainly a holier than 18-inch bubble, and if he gets in the middle of the field, a lot of things are going to hit that, like be hit by that. But this could easily get up to 21, maybe 24, by getting it off 5 or 6 times in the game. It would take until the latter rounds, of course, but in any case, it's still strong. And every time it goes off, every single unit that's within that range is taking 1 mortal damage. So then you have to say, well, how does this compare, this 1-2 punch of this ability plus this spell that makes the ability better? How does this compare to the spell that you're losing? Well, the other spell was dependent on things being diseased, right? So let's say you had a hard time getting things to be diseased in the first place, or getting that train, that snowball rolling. This new ability is just making your melee attacks better, right? And also your shooting attacks for what it's worth, because it's just a passive ability. Even though it's in red, it applies to shooting attacks because it doesn't say only combat attacks. So anyway, that's helping more than just, like the extra mortal damage you would be doing with the other spell, rolling a d3 on these units. That's doing more earlier on in the game to help, then, because it's boosting your melee output and shooting output too, then I think any amount of mortal damage you would have done before, with some small exceptions. Granted, you're not healing your units anymore, but remember, you're also still doing 1 mortal damage anyway. So on average, if the spell went off, you were getting 2 or 3, so 2.5 damage if it went off, or the spell went off and the roll went off for each unit. But this is automatically doing 1 per unit, plus you're making the save rolls worse, which is, I think, a trade that's worth doing, and it's easier to cast the spell in a 7. So yeah, it's kind of putting a timer on, like, if they don't kill Rotigus, it's basically just making sure that everyone is getting affected by this ability and just constantly getting hit. Now, of course, he's not giving diseased by doing that mortal damage or anything. That would be too strong, I think, but still pretty good. Okay, and then remember, our Rampage was the kind of anti-horde impact hits that he was doing. Now we've got a once per turn army, any combat phase, so you could do it in your opponents. Pick an enemy unit in combat, so it goes off more easily, doesn't have to have charge, and consider that in an army that's pretty slow to move, getting charge, like a guaranteed charge off, is harder than it might seem, because there's a lot of fast armies in this game right now that want to come charge you and pin you. So how often was Rotigus actually getting to use that ability? But anyway, we roll a dice. If the roll exceeds the target save characteristic, so it doesn't just match. Some of these rules we've been seeing lately that punish you for having a good save characteristic. Actually, now that I think about it, exceeds the save characteristic. I think they even said in an FAQ that that's the same as being the same as. I could be wrong. Someone let me know. But I think they had an FAQ about that the definition of exceeding a save characteristic is the same thing as needing to roll a 4-up. So in this case, like say you've got a 4-up save, it doesn't mean you have to roll a 5-up. I could be wrong about that. I think they had an FAQ about that somewhere. But in any case, it's one or the other. But I think it's the more generous one. You inflict amount of mortal damage on the target equal to their roll. So if they have a 3-up save, and you are rolling for, you have to beat a 3-up, as in you have to get a 4 or higher, then you'd be doing a 4, 5, or 6, so that's 15 damage divided by 2, because it goes off half the time, if you want to look at that, so about 7.5. Oh, no, what am I saying? And then, sorry, you got to do that divided by 6, actually. So anyway, it would be the average of those. But in any case, it's not a bad profile. Even if it's on -1, if they've got a good save, obviously. Yeah, I'm curious. I got to go look that up. I'm not going to spend the time now to do it. But anyway, that's a decent ability. And the fact that it goes off every single turn, or at least you get to try to use the ability every single turn, is nice. And you just have to pick a unit that's within 3. So maybe you want to just pick a unit that has a better chance of it going off. Anyway, okay. So yeah, is this decent? I think this is an upgrade. He's still expensive, at, what was it, 430? Yeah, 430 points. But a 2-cast wizard with a +1 to cast, that's also subtracting from save rolls for a good chunk of the enemy's army if this spell keeps going off. Granted, it's also, it's using one of your spells, but it's such a good ability. As long as you're planning on getting in combat, but that is kind of Nurgle's thing. It needs to get in there and tank, kind of tar pit people up. And then this rampage is kind of just icing on the cake. His profiles aren't amazing or anything, but they're not bad. He's just a tanky boy. So what are you guys thinking? I like this guy. I do think it's an upgrade from what it was, though it works differently. Obviously, has nothing to do with your diseased mechanism. Your synergy in the game. Okay, let's take a look at the other stuff we got. So we got a set of new heroic traits and prayer lore. So let's take a look at the heroic traits first, but as per usual, I like to look at the existing heroic traits to see if you do have to make a trade-off, what you might be giving up. So we had, obviously, 3. We had a passive ability gift of Febrile Frenzy. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But add 1 to the move characteristic of friendly Maggotkin and Nurgle units that do not have fly if they're wholly within 12 of the unit at the start of that move. I mean, +1 to move is good, but there's armies that have +2. I mean, Nurgle really needs it. They're slow. But, that seems like a good default setting. We also had Grandfather's Blessing. This is an end of any turn ability. If this unit, so the bearer of the heroic trait, is in combat with a diseased enemy unit, heal this unit d6. Okay. It very reliant on how much you need to be healing, but good on a Great Unclean one for sure. The Maggoth Lords are all named, so they couldn't take this. And I guess maybe you could take, I forget the Lord of whatever, maybe Afflictions, but the guy on the fly, he'd be a decent target for this. But it's just conditioned that they do get the disease keyword, and that he's going to need healing. So, but it's, end of any turn. And then our last one was Overpowering Stench. It was a reaction to the opponent declaring a command for a unit in combat with this unit. Roll dice on a 5+, that command has no effect. The command still counts as having been used, and the command points spent to use the command are still lost. Interestingly, it doesn't say that you can't use it multiple times per turn. So if I'm not mistaken, if you were in combat with 2 different units, one of them tried to use alt attack and another one tried to use alt defense, you would get to roll this for both of them. Granted, that's a very specific situation because you have to be within 3 inches of both of those units. 5-up is good, but I mean, obviously an ability that just turns off using commands in combat is way better. With the small exception that in this case they would also have to lose the CP. Whereas if you just like Banner of, what's it called? Banner of Dread, is that what it is? The Dread Banner in Slaves of Darkness that a unit with a standard bearer can take. It just turns off commands in general, but that means that the opponent doesn't even think about using a command on that unit. They just use it somewhere else. Whereas this throws away the whole opportunity. So in that sense, this is better, but yeah. Okay, so those are the 3 that existed already. Let's see what you might be choosing instead. We've got a once per battle, any combat phase, Living Plague. If this unit charged this turn, pick an enemy unit in combat with it to be the target, and the target automatically has the disease keyword. This will be before you start fighting. So if for some reason you have an ability that pairs or synergizes with disease and makes you better in combat against disease units, that's kind of fun. Spreading disease more reliably or not having to just choose the 1 unit per turn or whatever with the base ability is nice. We kind of see an equivalent of this with the Weird Flame Blade in Disciples of Tzeentch with the burning keyword. But that you can actually spread to multiple units if you split your attacks. This is still only 1 unit that you're giving it to. I think it's fine. Personally, I'd probably still rather take the +1 inch move to my Nurgle units of all the things, or maybe the CP one. But and this one's only if it charged. And how often are you getting that off? Some of your faster dudes, like the Maggoth Lords, aren't able to take this. So it would probably be the guy on the fly again, and then maybe a Guo, Great Unclean one. Unctuous Preacher, passive. If this unit is not a priest, it has the priest 1 ability, meaning it can chant once per turn, or once per your turn, and then a magical intervention. If this unit is already a priest, add 1 to chanting rolls. Yeah, this is entirely hinges entirely on how good it is to be a priest in this army. I don't have as good a sense of this as maybe, definitely a dedicated Nurgle player. So someone let me know what you think. I mean, it's kind of a boring ability, but it's nice to get an extra thing you can do. And remember, you can't interact with priests all that much, so those prayers just kind of go off. And adding 1 to chanting rolls is obviously cool too. I don't think there are that many priests in the army. Let me see. I'm going to take a quick look at the war scrolls. Okay, so I did end up looking it up. It appears to me that there's only one, especially one non-unique priest, and that's going to be your Harbinger of Decay. That's the new guy on horse from the Dawnbringer Crusades expansions. He was a priest level 1, so you could give him +1. I seem to remember him being pretty decent, but and then obviously just making another priest or another non-priest a priest could be nice because you just don't have that many to choose from. Also, for the record, it was the guy on the fly that I was referring to is the Lord of Afflictions. Okay, but anyway, our last heroic trait is Corpulent Avalanche. It's any charge phase if this unit charged this turn, so it's only enemy's charge phase if you pulled off a counter charge with 2 CP. But anyway, anytime you get a charge off, pick a visible enemy unit within 1 inch, roll a number of dice equal to this unit's move characteristic. For each 3+, inflict 1 mortal damage on the target. If I'm not mistaken, the highest move characteristic anyone in Nurgle has is an 8. Now remember, if you had an ability that could boost your movement characteristic, say, to the end of the turn, wink wink, then that would check the new plus to your movement characteristic. So it could get a little higher. But you're still just rolling 8 or however many dice, and for each 3+, you're doing 1 mortal damage on the target. Now, furthermore, if any damage points were allocated to the target by this ability, this unit can move 2d3 inches, so average of 4. It can move through the combat ranges of enemy units, but must end that move in combat with the units it was already in combat with at the start of the move. Now, if you read this too quickly, you might think that means you can't end up in combat with new units that you weren't already in combat with, but that's not what it says. It would need to have said, but must end that move in combat with only the units it was already in combat with, or something like that. All this is saying is any units you are already within 3 inches of, you still have to stay within 3 inches. So it's basically the same rules as a pile-in. You're just getting an extra 2d3 inches worth of pile-in, although it's going to be in the charge phase. It's because it resolves immediately. And then you could do a pile-in when you activate to fight. So what does that mean? Like if you tag multiple units, you're going to be more restricted in what you can do. If you're only tagging one, then you can move kind of around the perimeter of that unit up to 2d3 inches yourself. And because you can move through the combat ranges and maybe you have the fly keyword, if you had fly, you could even move through them to kind of reposition. But 2d3 inches isn't going to give you a whole lot to work with. But most of the units that could bear this are not going to have the fly keyword, and therefore it would just be you're eligible to move through the combat ranges as normal. Okay, so, I mean, that's decent. I don't know if any of these are really inspiring me all that much. Someone let me know what they think about becoming a priest or being a better priest. The combat phase, if you charge, giving the disease keyword automatically, is that good enough? And then this extra combat move, I don't know. I still think I like the maybe turning CPs off on a 5+ and or +1 inch move. I don't know. Yeah, I'm a little bit lukewarm on these, but let me know. Okay, and lastly, we have a prayer lore. And now that I've seen that Lumineth, it was possible to have a prayer lore with all unlimited spells, I'm curious, but I'm going to check now from now on to see if we have multiple unlimited spells, but we don't. It's just this one prayer that's unlimited. So I'm going to do first the unlimited prayer from the existing prayer lore. And then I'm going to take a look at, actually, look at this. I had no idea, but even though there is a priest in the army, there is no prayer lore for the army. So now we're getting a prayer lore. Interesting. Okay, so that solves that question. I just assumed that if they had a legitimate priest in the army, that this would have changed, that they would have gotten a prayer lore, but they just don't have one, unless I'm not seeing it correctly. Anyway, my apologies for not calling that out sooner, but this is a logical conclusion to come to. So what I'm actually going to do then is go to the one priest, which was, again, the Lord of Afflictions. Sorry, not the Lord of Afflictions, the Harbinger of Decay. And I'm going to just talk about his prayer that he already had. And then we can go back and talk about Unctuous Preacher with respect to that. And now that it turns them into a priest, it's interesting because now it gives you access to a whole set of things you didn't have access to before. So that does change my mind about Unctuous Preacher. But let's look at the one ability the Harbinger already had. He had a Omens of Decay prayer that went off on a 4 but went off big on a 10. You picked an enemy unit within 12 and subtract twice the current battle round number from the target's control score for the rest of the turn, and only the rest of the turn, not until your following hero phase. If the channel is a 10 plus, this ability affects all enemy units within 12 inches. Yeah, that's not a great prayer, because getting a 10 plus takes some time to build up. And so, yeah, and then even if you are adding +1 to the chanting rolls, I don't think it's helping you get there particularly easily. And subtracting twice the current battle round. So, I mean, that could be big of a swing, especially in round 5 when you're subtracting 10. I don't know. I don't think that was good enough for myself, but you guys let me know. But now that we've got a prayer lore, that might change some things. So our unlimited prayer, granted, you would only be able to do this per Harbinger of Decay that you're bringing, or the guy that you're making a priest. If I'm not mistaken, that's the only priest the army had access to. And a Harbinger of Decay was costing 150 points up to this point. Maybe that'll change a little bit. Maybe it goes up now that there is a prayer lore, actually. But anyway, our unlimited prayer is pick a friendly Maggotkin of Nurgle priest, chant this prayer, and a visible friendly Maggotkin of Nurgle unit holding than 12 of them. Add 2 inches to the target's move characteristic for the rest of the turn. In addition, if the chanting roll is a 6+, which isn't hard, all these go off on a 3, and a 6 isn't hard to get up to, especially if you have +1 to chant. For the rest of the turn, the target can use charge abilities even if it used a retreat. Okay, so what is this saying? Like, first off, keep in mind, if the only priest you get is because you took a normal hero, gave them the heroic trait of Unctuous Preacher to make them a priest, then this being an unlimited prayer means nothing to you because you've only got one priest. So it might as well not say unlimited on it. So you're giving max 1 unit +2 inch move, which is big, going up from like a 4-inch move to 6 or maybe an 8 to a 10 is definitely making the army speed up. And keep in mind, you could have, say you didn't choose to use Unctuous Preacher as your heroic trait and use the +1 inch bubble of Holy Than 12 inch. Then you're looking at up to +3 inch move for some units. Could be solid. And of course, in that case, unless you're buying an extra heroic trait via having too few points in your list or the ability to buy a new one, however that's going to work, then what we're talking about here is maybe you have to bring a certain number of Harbingers of Decay, which really makes their stock go up, because you could try to put this on 3 different units, say, with 3 different dudes, and getting a 3 off is not all that hard, especially if you're magical interventioning to save up bank some points or whatever. So it could be nice. And remember, it's for the rest of the turn, not until you're following hero phase, but that means also with a power through, if you want to do that, it would check for that ability then as well. Also, it works with this ability when I said hint hint for the Corpulent Avalanche, but again, now that I'm seeing how good this prayer lore might be, it seems like Unctuous Preacher might be a go-to. Okay, I like it. And then charge after retreating is, of course, really nice. It doesn't say that you don't take damage when you retreat, though, so keep that in mind. A lot of times when we see retreat and charge, it comes coupled with that ability, but there are units that take damage if they do that. So keep that in mind. All right, the next one, not unlimited. The rest of them aren't unlimited. We've got Agonizing Vomiting. Interesting. 3 up, goes off big on a 6. So pick a friendly priest chant and then a visible enemy unit within 18. Roll 7 dice. I think that's the number of Nurgle, right? If the chanting roll was a 6+, add 2 to what we're about to roll. Normally on a 5 up with those 7 dice, you're doing 1 mortal damage. So we're talking about like 2 to 3. And then if you're adding 2, so now it's on a 3 up, we're talking about like 4 or 5 maybe. Mortal damage. Not bad, but it's not like moving the needle per se. But remember, this whole prayer lore, unless I'm missing something, is totally new. As in, like, you didn't have access to prayer lores before. So pretty nice. That said, you don't have any 2-level priests in the army, if I'm not mistaken, which means I think you might just be, if you're spamming priests, you're just going to spam the unlimited prayer instead of doing the damage. But it's always nice to have that damage spell just in your back pocket in case you want to be, what's it called? You don't need to move anymore. You don't need to retreat and charge. I mean, maybe there's no point in retreating and charging because you don't have any charge bonuses, like something that, like a +1 to damage on charge or something like that, or impact hits. And remember, they did tell us that they're going to be adding in a new unlimited prayer, which lets you just bank points, and you only lose like 1 if you roll a 1. So that's kind of nice. So you could be saving up to get the retreat and charge pretty easily. Okay, and last but not least, Frothing Mucus goes off on a 3. Its big ability goes off on a 6. You pick a visible friendly MAGGOTKIN Nurgle unit holier than 12. Until the start of your next turn, the charge +1 damage ability has no effect on combat attacks that target the target. Interesting, lots of targets in there. Which basically just means if you get charged by some most likely cavalry that's good on the charge, maybe a monster, you're just turning it off, but it's only against that one unit. But if the chanting roll was big on a 6-up, weapon abilities other than the companion weapon ability have no effect instead. Still on that, only on that one unit. So basically you're giving them Armor of the Sithai from Idoneth, which has been really popular on either one of the 2 Eidolons. It turns off all auto wounds, all mortal damage from crits, any crits, right? And that's just really strong. No extra damage, no extra rend. Very strong. The only thing it doesn't turn off is companion, and that's a good thing because you don't want them to lose the companion keyword. Yeah, okay, so now that I know the full picture here, I think Unctuous Preacher is probably the go-to here, because why wouldn't you want this infectious surge in your army? Unless you just know that you're going to be taking a whole bunch of the Harbingers of Decay. I think taking at least 1 seems like an auto take now in Nurgle, just so you have access to this prayer lore, because it's just a whole extra set of things you didn't previously have access to, and his own warscroll spell was a little underwhelming, I feel. So yeah, otherwise I'd probably still lean toward the +1 inch move. Heroic trait, and then the Rotigus ability for extra rend I think is pretty solid. I think all of these updates, especially this combo of prayer lore plus making you maybe have an extra priest, is just real strong and really enables the army. So in a certain sense, even though it looks like we only got 1 new war scroll, I would say the Harbinger of Decay functionally just got added to the big buff list here as well. But what do you guys think? This is my last one for the time being. We got Sylvaneth tomorrow, and then Soulblight probably on Thursday. I mean, it's the only one left, right? So unless they're going to give us Chaos Dwarves all of a sudden. But yeah, I'm excited to see what Jonas has to say about the next 2 armies. Let me know down below what you guys think about this update. And until next time, Ryan out.